The Valorian Empire had ruled 17 star systems for 300 years. They were tall beings with silver skin and eyes that could see heat in the darkness. They had conquered every species they had ever met. Their empress, Valdira the Eternal, had never lost a single war. Then the humans came. Princess Saylara Vorn stood on the bridge of the Imperial flagship and watched the viewing screen in silence. Below them, the broken pieces of the Seventh Fleet drifted through space like dead leaves on a black river. 42 warships had been reduced to twisted metal and floating bodies in less than 6 hours. The humans had sent only 12 ships. Saylara was the third daughter of House Vorn. Her aunt was the Empress herself. She had grown up believing that the Valorian Empire was the greatest power in the galaxy. She had been taught that no species could stand against their military might. Now she watched the proof of that lie floating in the void before her. "We are receiving a transmission," said the communications officer. His voice was shaking. The screen flickered and a human face appeared. It was a woman with short gray hair and cold blue eyes. She wore a simple military uniform with the name Coleman on her chest. "This is Admiral Patricia Coleman of the Earth Colonial Fleet," the woman said. "Your 7th Fleet has been destroyed. Your 3rd Fleet is surrounded. We have 3 carrier groups moving toward your core worlds as we speak. I suggest you consider your next words very carefully." The Empress herself stepped forward. Saylara had never seen her aunt look afraid before. But there was fear in those silver eyes now. "What are your terms?" Valdira asked. "A political marriage to cement the peace. One of your royals to one of our officers. That is how we will end this." Saylara spoke before anyone else could. "I volunteer." Every eye on the bridge turned toward her. Her aunt's face showed shock. Then something that might have been relief. The other officers looked at her, like she had volunteered to die. Perhaps she had. But Saylara needed to understand. She had studied the tactical recordings of the battle. She had watched the human ships move in ways that made no sense. They had taken damage that should have destroyed them and kept fighting. They had used tactics that no sane commander would ever attempt. And they had won. She needed to know why. 3 weeks later, Saylara stood in a cold building on a human planet called New Virginia. The room was plain and simple. There were no decorations, no symbols of power, no displays of wealth, just rows of wooden chairs and a man in a dark suit standing at the front. The human she was about to marry stood beside her. His name was Daniel Cooper. He was a lieutenant commander in their fleet, a logistics officer who handled supplies and cargo. He was not a warrior. He was not a hero. He was just an ordinary man, with brown hair and green eyes that looked tired. Saylara was taller than him by almost a full head. She was stronger, faster, and would live 3 times longer than he would. By every measure that mattered to her people, she was superior to him. Yet his people had destroyed her fleet in 6 hours. The ceremony was short. They exchanged words that meant nothing to Saylara. The man in the dark suit declared them married. A few humans in the audience clapped politely. And just like that, she was the wife of Daniel Cooper. They walked together to the quarters they would now share. It was a small apartment in a military housing complex. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a living area with a window that looked out over a gray city. Nothing special, nothing impressive. "You can have the larger bedroom," Daniel said. "I do not need much space." Saylara turned to look at him. "You volunteered for this." "I read the reports. They asked for volunteers, and you were the first to step forward." "I was. Why? Why would you volunteer to marry an enemy? A member of the species that killed thousands of your people?" Daniel walked to the window and looked out at the city. The sun was setting, and the sky had turned orange and red. He was quiet for a long moment. "We have a saying on Earth," he said finally. "Keep your friends close, and your enemies closer." Saylara did not understand. "You think I am a threat? I have no weapons, no allies here. No way to harm you or your people. That is not what the saying means." Daniel turned to face her. There was no anger in his eyes. No fear. Just a strange kind of calm that Saylara found unsettling. "It means that the best way to understand someone is to stay near them, to watch them, To learn how they think. You want to study me, and you want to study us. He smiled slightly. That is why you volunteered. Not out of duty or sacrifice. You want to know how 12 ships destroyed 42. You want to understand what makes humans different. Saylara felt exposed. This ordinary man had seen through her in an instant. You are more observant than I expected. Most people underestimate logistics officers. We are not glamorous. We do not fight battles or give speeches. We just make sure the bullets get where they need to go and the food arrives on time. He shrugged. But you cannot do that job without learning to pay attention. They stood in silence for a moment. Outside, the sun finished setting, and the city lights began to flicker on, one by one. This does not have to be unpleasant, Daniel said. We are both doing our duty. We both have reasons for being here. Maybe we can even learn something useful from each other. To though. 21. 21. 21. 21 1. 21. 21. 21. 21. Saylara considered his words. She had expected hostility. She had expected cold tolerance at best. This quiet offer of mutual respect was something she had not prepared for. Very well, she said. We will learn from each other. Daniel nodded. Good. Are you hungry? I was going to make dinner. Nothing fancy. Just pasta with tomato sauce. But it is warm and filling. I do not know what pasta is. Then tonight you learn your first lesson about humanity. He walked toward the kitchen. We may not be the strongest or the smartest species in the galaxy, but we know how to make good food. Saylara followed him into the kitchen and watched as he began to prepare the meal. He moved with easy practice, filling a pot with water, opening containers, measuring ingredients. There was nothing special about it. Nothing that explained how his species had defeated hers. But she would learn. That was why she was here, and she had all the time in the world. 6 months passed. Saylara began keeping a private journal, where she recorded everything she observed about her human husband and his species. She wrote in her native language, so that no human could read it. Every night before she slept, she added new entries. Entry 12. Daniel sleeps only 4 to 5 hours each night. When I asked if this was unhealthy, he laughed and said he was getting more rest now than he did during his academy days. Valorians require 9 hours of sleep minimum to function properly. How do humans operate on so little? Entry 23. Attended a social gathering at the home of Daniel's friend Christopher Hayes and his wife Laura. The humans were cooking meat over an open fire in their backyard. They call this activity a barbecue. I watched them eat foods covered in a red sauce that made their eyes water and their faces turn red. When I asked why they would eat something that caused them pain, Laura laughed and said it was delicious. She offered me something called a ghost pepper. I refused. Entry 31. Daniel cut his hand while repairing a broken shelf. The wound was deep. I could see the white of bone through the blood. He wrapped it in a cloth, said that is going to leave a mark, and continued working. I insisted he go to the medical center. He seemed genuinely confused by my concern. The doctor put 7 stitches in his hand. Daniel was back at work the next morning. Entry 45. Discovered that humans engage in activities called extreme sports for entertainment. They jump from aircraft with fabric attached to their backs. They climb vertical rock faces using only their hands and feet. They dive into deep water and hold their breath for several minutes. When I asked Daniel to explain why anyone would risk their life for fun, he thought about it for a moment and said, "We get bored easily." Entry 58. Daniel took me to watch something called a marathon. Humans ran for over 40 kilometers without stopping. Many of them collapsed at the end. Some were bleeding from their feet. Some had to be carried away by medical teams. And yet they all seemed happy. Proud, even. One woman finished the race and immediately asked when the next one would be held. Saylara read through her entries and tried to find a pattern. The humans seemed to have no sense of self-preservation. They actively sought out pain and discomfort. They pushed their bodies past breaking points that would kill or cripple most species. And they did it casually. as if it were nothing special. But it was entry 67 that truly disturbed her. She had been granted access to historical archives as part of a cultural exchange program. She expected to find military records and technological documents. Instead, she found the history of Earth itself. The humans had nearly destroyed themselves, multiple times. They had discovered how to split atoms and immediately used that knowledge to build weapons. They had dropped those weapons on 2 of their own cities, killing hundreds of thousands of their own kind in seconds. They had then spent the next 50 years building enough of these weapons to destroy their entire planet several times over. But that was not all. They had poisoned their own air and water with industrial waste. They had cut down forests that produced the oxygen they needed to breathe. They had driven thousands of their own animal species to extinction. They had created diseases in laboratories. They had fought wars that killed millions over invisible lines drawn on maps, over different ideas about gods and governments, over resources they could have simply shared. Lara read for hours. The more she learned, the less she understood. By every rational measure, humanity should have been extinct long ago. They had done everything possible to destroy themselves, and yet here they were, spreading across the stars, defeating empires that had existed for centuries. That night, she confronted Daniel. "Your species has faced extinction at least 7 times by my count," she said. "All of them caused by your own actions. How are you still alive?" Daniel looked up from the book he was reading. He did not seem surprised by the question. "Stubbornness. Mostly. That is not an answer. It is the only honest answer I have." He set down his book. "We do stupid things. We hurt ourselves. We make terrible decisions. But when everything falls apart, when we are standing at the edge of the cliff, something in us refuses to jump. We find a way to survive. We always find a way. But why? What makes you keep going when any rational species would simply accept defeat?" Whoa. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Deeper. Older, somehow. "Because we are afraid of the dark," he said. "Humans spent 100,000 years as prey animals. We were not the strongest or the fastest. We had no claws, no fangs, no armor. Every night, we huddled around fires and listened to predators circling in the darkness. Every morning, we counted who was still alive. That fear is still inside us. It never went away. So you survive out of fear? We survive out of spite." Daniel's eyes met hers, and for the first time, Lara saw something ancient looking back, something that had been there all along, hidden beneath the casual smile and the tired eyes. "The universe has been trying to kill us since we crawled out of the mud. Predators, diseases, ice ages, asteroids, each other. And every single time, we refuse to die. Not because we are brave, not because we are strong, because something inside us looks at death and says, 'Not today.'" Lara felt a chill run down her spine. "And when you face an enemy? When another species threatens you? Then we treat them like every other thing that has tried to kill us." Daniel's voice was flat. "Matter of fact. We do whatever it takes to survive. We break rules. We ignore limits. We sacrifice everything we have to make sure that when the dust settles, we are the ones still standing. Even if it means destroying yourselves in the process? Even then." He picked up his book again. "We have already almost destroyed ourselves 7 times, you said. What is one more scar? We will survive it. We always do." Lara returned to her room that night and stared at her journal for a long time. She had come here to find a weakness, something the Empire could exploit, some flaw in human nature that could be used against them. Instead, she had found the opposite. The humans were not strong despite their flaws. They were strong because of them. All that pain, all that suffering, all those near-extinction events had forged them into something that could not be broken. They had been tempered by fire so many times that the fire no longer scared them. She opened her journal and wrote one final entry for the night. Entry 68. "I believe I understand now why 12 human ships destroyed 42 of ours. It is not their technology. It is not their tactics. It is that they simply do not know how to give up. The concept does not exist for them. They will fight until they win or until they are all dead. And even then, I suspect their ghosts would keep fighting. The Empress was wise to accept peace. War with humanity is not a war that can be won. It can only be survived. She closed the journal and turned off the light. In the darkness of her room, she could hear Daniel moving around in the kitchen, making himself a late-night snack. Such an ordinary sound, such an ordinary man. And yet behind those tired green eyes lived something that had looked into the void and refused to blink. 1 year after the wedding, Saylara attended her first diplomatic summit. Representatives from 18 spacefaring civilizations had gathered on Meridian Prime, a neutral space station far from any empire's territory. They were there to discuss trade routes and territorial boundaries. Saylara went as Daniel's wife. She was expected to stand quietly and look decorative, a symbol of the peace between humans and Valorians. Nothing more. What she witnessed that day changed everything she thought she knew about war. The Kreeth Dominion had sent their largest delegation. The Kreeth were reptilian creatures, cold-blooded and aggressive. Their scales were dark green and their eyes were yellow with vertical pupils. They had conquered 93 star systems through brute force and feared nothing in the known galaxy. Their leader was a massive creature named Sovereign Vex. He stood 3 meters tall, and his claws could cut through steel. When he entered the conference chamber, the other delegates moved out of his way, all except the humans. The human delegation was led by a woman named Ambassador Nicole Ward. She was old by human standards, with gray hair and wrinkled skin. She walked with a slight limp from some old injury. She was smaller than almost everyone else in the room, but she did not move when Sovereign Vex approached. "The humans have 12 colony worlds," Vex announced to the assembled delegates. His voice was deep and filled the chamber. "The Dominion has 93. You will surrender the Kepler territories to us, or we will take them by force." The other delegates held their breath. Everyone knew that the Kreeth were the most powerful military force in this sector. Everyone knew that their threats were not empty. Ambassador Ward smiled. It was a small smile, the kind a grandmother might give to a child who had said something foolish. "The Dominion is welcome to try," she said. Vex's scales flushed darker with anger. "You dare threaten us? You are nothing. A handful of worlds with a handful of ships. We could crush you in a month." "You could try," Ward repeated. She did not raise her voice. She did not show any fear. "But before you make that decision, I would like to show you something." She pressed a button on her wrist, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a map of stars and planets, with borders drawn in glowing lines. "This is the Thessian hegemony as it existed 40 years ago," Ward said. 61 worlds. A population of 40 billion. A military fleet 3 times the size of yours. The map flickered and changed. Where there had been 61 worlds, now there were only 2. Where there had been vast territories, now there was almost nothing. "This is the Thessian hegemony today," Ward continued. 2 worlds. A population of 800 million. No military fleet at all. Silence fell over the chamber. Every delegate stared at the map. "The Thessians made the same calculation you are making now," Ward said. "They looked at our numbers and saw weakness. They attacked our colony on Harvest, killed 40,000 civilians, and declared war." She paused. "The war lasted 11 years. 11 years? Vex sounded confused. "That is a long time for such a small conflict." "It was not a small conflict. And it did not last 11 years because we needed that long to defeat them. It lasted 11 years because we needed that long to make sure they understood." "Understood what?" Ward's smile disappeared. Her face became hard and cold. "That there is no scenario where attacking humanity ends well for the attacker. We do not fight to win. We fight until the other side no longer exists as a threat. Not as a punishment. Not as a warning. That is simply what we are. That is simply what we do." Vex stared at her. His claws flexed at his sides. You would destroy an entire civilization over one attack? Oat, we did destroy an entire civilization over one attack. 59 worlds burned, 39 billion dead. We did not stop until they begged us for mercy. And even then, we did not stop until we were certain they would never threaten us again. She gestured at the map. The Thessians are still alive. We allowed that. We could have ended them completely. We chose not to. But they will never recover. They will never again be a power in this galaxy. And every species that watched that war learned a very important lesson. What lesson? That humanity is not worth the cost. Ward turned to face the full assembly. We have 12 colony worlds. The Kreth have 93. But we have something the Kreth do not have. We have a reputation. Everyone in this room knows what we did to the Thessians. Everyone in this room knows that we will do the same to anyone who attacks us. That reputation is worth more than 1,000 warships. She turned back to Vex. So please, Sovereign, take the Kepler territories. We will not stop you. But when you wake up in 10 years and find your empire reduced to rubble, remember that I warned you. Remember that you had a choice. Vex did not respond. He stood frozen, his yellow eyes fixed on the human woman who was a fraction of his size. Then, slowly, he turned and walked out of the chamber. His delegation followed. The Kepler territories were never mentioned again. That night, in their quarters on the station, Saylara asked Daniel about the Thessian War. 11 years, she said. Your species spent 11 years destroying a single enemy. The resources alone must have been enormous. They were. Daniel sat by the window, looking out at the stars. We lost 2 colony worlds, 3 million soldiers, civilian casualties in the hundreds of thousands. The colonial authority nearly went bankrupt paying for it. Then why? Why continue past the point of victory? You had already defeated them after 2 years. The reports show that clearly. Why continue for 9 more? Daniel was quiet for a long time, because if we had stopped at victory, the next species would have tried the same thing. And the one after that. And the one after that. He turned to look at her. The Thessian War was never about the Thessians. It was about every other civilization watching us and calculating whether humans were worth the risk. You sacrificed millions of your own people to send a message. We sacrificed millions of our own people to ensure that we would never have to sacrifice millions more. Every species that watched that war learned that attacking humanity is not just dangerous, it is suicidal. The cost will always be higher than any possible gain. Saylara thought about her aunt, the Empress. She thought about how quickly Valdira had accepted the peace terms after losing only 1 fleet. The Empress understood, Saylara said slowly. She was not accepting peace. She was avoiding becoming the next example. Your aunt is a very wise woman. Saylara looked at her husband. This ordinary man with his tired eyes and his quiet voice. He had never fired a weapon in combat. He had never commanded a warship. He spent his days counting supplies and scheduling cargo shipments. And yet he carried the same fire inside him that had burned the Thessians to ash. All of you, she said softly. Every single human. You all carry this inside you. We do. Daniel's voice was gentle. We do not want war. We do not enjoy killing. Most of us just want to live quiet lives and raise our families in peace. But when someone threatens us, when someone hurts us, something wakes up, something old and cold and patient, and it does not go back to sleep until the threat is gone. Forever. Forever. Saylara looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Kreeth Dominion was reconsidering its plans. Somewhere out there, the ruins of the Thessian hegemony served as a monument to human vengeance. Somewhere out there, every intelligent species in the galaxy was asking themselves the same question. Is it worth it? The answer was always no. In the 3rd year of their marriage, Saylara received a message that broke her heart. Her younger sister, Thalara, was dead. The message came from a Valorian military officer with a stiff face and formal words. There had been a border conflict with a species called the Morrigan Collective. Fighting had broken out unexpectedly. Thalara's diplomatic ship had been caught in the crossfire. There were no survivors. Salara read the message 3 times. Then she walked to her bedroom, closed the door, and did not come out. Valorians processed grief differently than humans. They did not cry or scream or rage. They went quiet. They withdrew into themselves and built walls around their pain. They needed time alone to process what they had lost. For 2 weeks, Salara barely spoke. She ate only when Daniel brought food to her door and insisted. She did not leave the apartment. She sat in the darkness of her room and remembered her sister. Thalara had been the youngest of the Vorn daughters. She had been bright and curious and full of life. She had wanted to be a diplomat, to travel to new worlds and meet new species. She had believed that peace was possible between all peoples, if only they would talk to each other. Now she was gone, scattered atoms in the void between stars. Daniel did not push. He did not offer empty words of comfort or tell her that everything would be all right. He simply remained present. He handled the administrative messages that came from the Valorian embassy. He shielded her from the political inquiries and the requests for statements. He made sure she had food and water and clean clothes. He waited. On the 15th day, Salara finally emerged from her room. Her silver skin looked dull. Her eyes were hollow. She found Daniel sitting in the living room, reading a book. He looked up when she entered but did not speak. "I do not understand your kind," Salara said. Her voice was rough from disuse. "You have experienced so much death. Your wars, your plagues, your disasters. Billions of your own people lost across your history. How do you continue? How do you not simply collapse under the weight of all that loss?" Daniel set down his book. He did not try to touch her or move closer. He just sat there, calm and patient. "We carry it," he said. "Carry it? Every loss. Every death. Every person we have loved and lost. We carry them with us. We do not forget. We do not move on. We pick up the weight. And we keep walking." Salara shook her head. "That sounds exhausting." "It is. It absolutely is." Daniel's voice was soft. "But the alternative is to stop caring. To close ourselves off so that nothing can hurt us anymore, and that is not something we know how to do." He stood up slowly and walked to the window. The sun was setting outside, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Grief is just love with nowhere to go," he said. "When someone dies, all that love does not disappear. It is still there, inside us, looking for a place to land. So we redirect it. We build monuments. We write songs. We name ships after the people we have lost, so that their memory rides with us into battle. We take all that love, all that pain, and we forge it into something useful. Useful how? Determination. Purpose. The will to keep going even when everything hurts." He turned to face her. "Your sister mattered. Her life had value. Her death has meaning. And if you let me, I will help you carry this weight. Not because I am your husband. Not because I am obligated. But because that is what humans do. We carry each other when the weight becomes too much." Salara stared at him. This ordinary man. This logistics officer who counted boxes and scheduled shipments. He was offering to share her pain as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you choose to carry someone else's grief?" "Because no one should have to carry it alone." For the first time in 3 years of marriage, Salara reached out and took his hand. His skin was warm against her cool silver fingers. She had expected the contact to feel strange or uncomfortable. Instead, it felt like an anchor, something solid to hold on to in the darkness. "Tell me about your losses," she said quietly. "Tell me who you carry." Daniel led her to the couch and they sat together. And then he talked. He told her about his brother Samuel, who had died in a training accident when they were both young. Samuel had wanted to be a pilot. He had been brave and reckless and full of dreams. A mechanical failure had sent his training craft into a mountain. He was 19 years old. He told her about his first commanding officer, Commander Catherine Webb. She had been strict and demanding, and the best leader Daniel had ever known. During the Thessian War, her ship had been caught in an ambush. She had ordered the crew to evacuate and then turned the ship directly into the enemy fleet, buying time for the escape pods to get away. She had saved 300 lives with her death. He told her about his grandmother, Margaret Cooper. She had survived the resource crisis on Earth when millions had starved. She had kept her family alive through sheer determination and refused to give up even when there was nothing left to eat. She had lived to be 94 years old and died peacefully in her sleep, still telling stories about the hard times. "I carry all of them," Daniel said, "every day. Samuel rides with me when I do something brave. Catherine guides me when I have to make hard decisions. My grandmother reminds me that humans can survive anything if we just refuse to quit. And it does not crush you? All that weight? Some days it does. Some days I wake up and the burden feels impossible. But then I remember that they are counting on me to keep going. They lived and died so that I could be here. The least I can do is honor that by not giving up." Lara was quiet for a long moment. Then she began to talk about the Lara. She talked about her sister's laugh, bright and musical. She talked about the games they had played as children in the crystal gardens of their home world. She talked about the Lara's belief in peace and understanding, her dream of a galaxy where all species could live together without war. Daniel listened. He did not interrupt or offer advice. He simply listened, and somehow, that was exactly what Lara needed. When she finished, the sun had fully set and the room was dark except for the city lights outside the window. "She sounds wonderful," Daniel said. She was. Lara felt something shift inside her. The weight was still there, but it felt different now. Shared somehow. "I do not want to forget her." "Then do not. Carry her with you. Let her memory guide you. And when you do good things in this galaxy, do them in her name." Lara looked at her husband. She had married him to study his species. She had expected to find weaknesses she could exploit. Instead, she had found something she had never expected: kindness. Real kindness, offered freely without expectation of return. "Thank you," she said. The words felt strange in her mouth. Valorians did not thank easily. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "That is what family does. Family." She had never thought of him that way before. He was supposed to be a political arrangement, a symbol, a tool for peace. But somewhere along the way, he had become something more. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere among them, Thalara's ashes drifted in the void. But here, in this small apartment on a human world, Lara felt something she had not felt since the news arrived: hope. 5 years after her wedding, Lara received a summons from the Empress. She traveled alone to the Valorian homeworld, leaving Daniel behind on New Virginia. The journey took 3 weeks through hyperspace. She spent the time reviewing her notes, organizing 5 years of observations into something coherent, something that might satisfy her aunt's questions. The Imperial Palace had not changed. The same crystal spires reached toward the purple sky. The same guards in silver armor stood at every door. The same servants moved silently through the halls, heads bowed in respect. But Empress Valdira had changed. She looked older. The silver of her skin had dulled. The light in her eyes had dimmed. The war with the humans, brief as it was, had taken something from her. The confidence that had defined her reign for 3 centuries was gone. In its place was something that looked almost like doubt. "You have lived among them," Valdira said without greeting or ceremony. 5 years watching, studying, reporting. But your reports tell me nothing I can use, so I have brought you here to ask you directly. I want the truth, niece. The complete truth. Tell me why the humans frighten me." Lara had prepared for this moment. She had practiced her response 100 times on the journey. But now, standing before the most powerful person in the Empire, all her prepared words seemed inadequate. So she spoke from the heart instead. "They frighten you because they cannot be broken," she said. "The Valorian Empire has always expanded through dominance. We conquer. We assimilate. We impose our will. For 300 years, that strategy worked. Every species we met eventually surrendered. They recognized our power and accepted their place beneath us. And the humans do not accept that place. The humans cannot. Not because they are proud or stupid. It is simply not in their nature. Saylara stepped closer to the throne. Their entire history is one of defiance. They defied their environment when it tried to freeze them or burn them or starve them. They defied predators that were bigger and stronger and faster. They defied diseases that killed millions. They defied each other in wars that lasted centuries. And in every single case, they refused to surrender. They refused to stay down. Valdira's hands gripped the arms of her throne. There must be a weakness. Every species has a weakness we can exploit. Their weakness is the same as their strength. Saylara chose her next words carefully. They feel too much. They care too deeply. They form attachments that make them irrational. It leads them to make decisions that no logical species would make. They will sacrifice themselves for strangers. They will fight impossible battles for lost causes. They will throw away everything they have for ideas and beliefs that exist only in their minds. That sounds like weakness. It would be, except for what it creates. Saylara met her aunt's eyes directly. That same capacity for feeling means they will never stop fighting. Not for survival. Not for victory. Not for any practical purpose. They fight because surrender is a concept their minds cannot accept. You could burn their worlds, scatter their people, destroy everything they have ever built, and the survivors would spend generations plotting their revenge. Generations? Their recorded history spans only a few thousand years. In that time, they have maintained grudges that lasted centuries. They teach their children to remember old enemies. Their children teach their children. The hate is passed down like a family treasure. The Thessians discovered this. After 11 years of war, the humans did not simply defeat them. They broke them so completely that they will never recover. And the humans did that not out of cruelty, but as a warning to everyone else. Valdira was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. Then how do we protect ourselves? How do we ensure the Empire's survival? By never giving them a reason to turn their attention toward us. Saylara took a deep breath. The humans are not a problem to be solved. They are a force to be accommodated. The only winning strategy is to maintain the peace. Keep your word. Honor the treaty. Give them no cause for war. That is not how empires survive. Empires survive through strength, through dominance, through the elimination of threats. With respect, Aunt, that doctrine has failed. Saylara kept her voice calm, despite the risk of speaking so directly to the Empress. The humans have shown us the limits of military power. All our ships, all our soldiers, all our centuries of conquest mean nothing against a species that simply will not quit. We can hurt them. We can never defeat them. The best we can hope for is coexistence. Valdira stared at her niece for a long moment. Then, something in her face shifted. The doubt was still there. But alongside it was something that might have been acceptance. And your husband? Your reports indicate genuine affection has developed between you. It has. Saylara did not look away or apologize. Daniel Cooper is kind, patient, and loyal. By human standards, he is completely ordinary. He has never led troops into battle. He has never done anything remarkable. He is average in every measurable way. And yet he carries the same fire inside him that burned the Thessian hegemony to ash. Every human does. Every single one of them, from their greatest warriors to their lowest servants, carries that capacity for total commitment. That is what makes them terrifying. That is what makes them magnificent. Saylara straightened her shoulders. The Empire sees humanity as a threat to be managed. I have come to see them as perhaps the only species in this galaxy worthy of genuine respect. They are not better than us. They are simply different in a way that makes them unconquerable. And I believe that difference could make them our greatest allies if we are wise enough to earn their friendship instead of their enmity. The audience ended shortly after. Valdira dismissed her niece with few words and no indication of whether she agreed with anything Saylara had said. That was typical for the Empress. She listened, she considered, and she made her decisions in private. 3 weeks later, Saylara returned to New Virginia. Daniel was waiting for her at the spaceport. He looked the same as always. Tired eyes, brown hair that needed cutting, the slight smile that never quite left his face. He carried a bouquet of flowers, a human custom he had taught her to appreciate. "How was it?" he asked as they walked to their transport. "Difficult. The Empress has many questions and no good answers. Does she understand now? About us?" Saylara considered the question as they climbed into the vehicle. Through the window, she watched the streets of the human city pass by. Ordinary people living ordinary lives. Families walking together. Children playing in parks. Workers heading home after long days. All of them carrying that fire inside. All of them capable of bringing empires to their knees. "I believe she is beginning to understand," Saylara said finally. "Whether she will accept what I told her is another matter." They arrived at their apartment as the sun was setting. Daniel went to the kitchen to start dinner while Saylara stood at the window and watched the sky change colors. 5 years ago, she had come here as a spy. A political tool sent to study an enemy. She had expected to find weakness. Instead, she had found a species unlike any other in the galaxy. A species that laughed at pain and turned grief into fuel. A species that loved so fiercely that their love became a weapon. A species that had looked into the abyss so many times that the abyss had learned to look away. "Daniel," she said quietly, "your kind ends empires effortlessly. Not because you are stronger, or smarter, or more advanced, but because you refuse to accept that you cannot." He appeared in the kitchen doorway, a spatula in his hand. "Pretty much, yeah. Is that a problem?" She turned to look at him. This ordinary man. Her husband. Her friend. "No," she said. "I believe it is the most extraordinary thing I have ever encountered." She crossed the room and took his hand. His skin was warm and rough and real. "I love you," she said. It was the first time she had spoken those words to him. Daniel's tired eyes softened. The smile on his face grew just a little wider. "I love you too." Outside, the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere among them, empires rose and fell. Wars were fought and forgotten. Species emerged and went extinct. The universe continued its endless dance of creation and destruction. But here, in a small apartment on a human world, 2 people from different species stood together and looked toward the future. A future where humanity and the Valorian Empire would not be enemies. A future Saylara would help build, one day at a time. Because that was what humans taught her. You do not build the future in grand gestures or sweeping changes. You build it in small moments. In kindnesses offered freely. In hands held in the darkness. In the stubborn, defiant, impossible belief that tomorrow can be better than today. That was why humanity ended empires. And that was why humanity would endure long after every empire was dust.